A locked latch hid a silent corpse. Welcome to Marple Mysteries. I am your host, Harrington. Tell me your city. I enjoy every message. Wolfe opens the door to danger. It was a little after 11 on a Tuesday when the front door latch decided to act up. I don't mean it fell off. I mean it didn't click the way a latch ought to click. And in our brownstone on West 35th, that counts as a sin against nature. I was in the office with the morning mail stacked on my desk, and Wolfe behind his, wearing the fixed expression he uses for everything from a missing orchid to a missing conscience. Fritz was clattering in the kitchen, and the house smelled of coffee. The latch said snick, pause, snick again. Not right. I got up, crossed the hall, and opened the door before whoever was outside could try a third time. The man on the stoop was tall, narrow, and damp, with a hat that had seen better weather and a face that had seen worse. His eyes had that hunted look that comes from either too much guilt or not enough sleep. "Mr. Goodwin?" he asked. "That's me. You're early for the fire inspection." He tried to smile and missed. "I need to see Mr. Wolfe. It's important." It always is. "Name?" "Calvin Harker." I remembered the call from yesterday, a lawyer with a shaky voice and a promise of cash. "Come in," I said. He came in like a man who expects the floor to give way. When I closed the door, the latch finally caught, sounding tired instead of firm, and I filed that away. Wolfe looked up over his glasses when we entered the office. He doesn't rise for clients. Clients rise to him. Harker took the red leather chair, perched on the edge, and clasped his hat in both hands. "Well," Wolfe said. Harker swallowed. "Mr. Wolfe, I don't know where else to go. The police won't listen, and if I speak to anyone in my company, I'll be finished." "Your company?" "I'm counsel for Latchley Instruments." That got a fractional lift of Wolfe's eyebrows. Latchley Instruments makes high-grade locks and security latches for banks, museums, and rich people who don't trust their neighbors. Their founder, Horace Latchley, built a fortune on the idea that a door should stay shut unless the right hand said otherwise. Harker went on. "Mr. Latchley is dead." I blinked. Dead. Or corporate dead. Dead. His knuckles whitened. They're calling it an accident. He had a private safe room in his townhouse. The door sealed, the internal release failed, and by the time his housekeeper found him, he'd suffocated. Wolfe's eyes stayed steady. "And you think the failure was engineered?" "I know it was." Harker leaned forward. "Mr. Latchley had an override. I drafted the legal protocol for it myself. There is no way he could be trapped in his own room unless someone disabled it. Someone who understood his system." "Why are you telling me?" "Because the last person to see him alive was me. Yesterday afternoon, we argued. He dismissed me. This morning he was found." He spread his hands. "They'll say I killed him because he fired me, or because I stole from him, or because I'm with his daughter. And there are others who wanted him dead." "Others?" Harker hesitated, then named them: his daughter, Celia, who runs marketing and wants to sell the firm; his nephew, Martin, head engineer, who says the old man's perfectionism is bleeding them; Irene Voss, the chief financial officer, who has been hiding his losses; and a consultant he hired 2 months ago, Grant Rook, who has access to everything and leaves companies in ruins. I watched Wolfe. He hadn't shifted an inch, but something in him was awake. "You want me to prove the death was contrived and to point to the contriver?" he said. "Yes, and to keep my name out of a noose." Wolfe glanced at the door, then back at Harker. "A man who makes latches dies behind one. Such irony is rarely accidental. Mr. Goodwin will take your statement. I will decide whether to accept your problem." Harker exhaled. I pulled my pad toward me. The brownstone had been disturbed, and from the feel of that tired latch, it wasn't done with us yet. Harker talked for 40 minutes while I wrote, and Wolfe watched him the way a cat watches a mouse that might be carrying something interesting. He tried to rush. Wolfe slowed him with a finger. and I scooped up the details. Horace Latchley had called Harker to the townhouse on East 79th at 4 yesterday. Latchley was 72 and proud of it. Off his library, he had a safe room, steel-lined with air scrubber, phone, and a door of his own design. He'd built it after a burglary scare and liked to show it off. They met in the library. Latchley was furious about a draft merger contract Harker had prepared. He said I was plotting to sell his soul, Harker told us. He called me a parasite. His voice shook, but it was anger, not sorrow. And you replied? Wolfe asked. I said he was irrational, that the company needed capital. I shouldn't have. You did, Wolfe said. Harker said Latchley ordered him out, then went to the safe room and slammed the door. Harker heard the locking sequence. 3 clicks, a pause, then a deep clunk. Out of habit, he checked the external indicator. It read sealed. He left at 5. Latchley was alive when he left. This morning at 8, the housekeeper, Mrs. Lyle, found the library door ajar. She called through the intercom. No answer. She used a service key and couldn't open the safe room. She fetched the doorman, then the super, then emergency services. The fire boys cut the hinges. When they got it open, Latchley was dead on the floor, faced toward the door. Police say mechanical failure, Harker said, but the hinges are fail-safe. The override is separate. It can't jam unless you do violence to it. Wolfe grunted. The internal release. Found. Snapped. Clean break. He also gave us the other players. Celia Latchley, daughter and marketing chief pushing to sell the firm. Martin Latchley, nephew and head engineer who hated the old man's perfectionism. Irene Voss, the CFO with a taste for hiding losses, and Grant Rook, a consultant with access to everything. When Harker had finished, Wolfe waved him to silence. Mr. Harker, I will consider. You will remain available. You will not speak to the police further without informing me. Harker stood. You'll take it? My fee, if I do, is no less than $10,000, plus expenses. You will see to it. He flinched, then nodded. I walked him to the door. The latch resisted at the last inch before catching. Harker noticed. Something wrong? Just moody. He left with his shoulders hunched and his hat low. Back in the office, Wolfe stared at his notepad. Archie, telephone Saul Panzer and ask him to come at 2. Also Inspector Kramer. Tell him I might have business for him. Might. I'm not certain yet. This death is theatrical. Someone wanted it told. Obtain the newspapers. I brought the morning editions. The Times had a small item saying the police called it a tragic malfunction and that the company's board would meet tomorrow. It mentioned a new product, the Latchley Halo, scheduled for launch next week. Wolfe read, lips pursed. A board meeting tomorrow, a product launch next week. Motivation increases. Could be a stock bump if he dies before signing a sale, I said, or a salvation if the sale does not occur. He looked at me. You will go to the townhouse, see the safe room door, speak to the housekeeper, doorman, any police, then visit Latchley Instruments and observe without announcing my interest. Sure, I'll just sneak into a security company. Your gift is charm. Employ it. And you? I will remain here. I will think. Go. I went upstairs for my jacket. On the way out, I retried the latch. It clicked on the first try, crisp as a salute. I didn't like that. Fritz called from the kitchen that lunch would be ready at 1. Wolfe answered without turning his head. I promised my stomach I'd be back for it and went out to fetch the cab. The street air felt raw, and I wondered who else had been listening to Latches lately. The cab dropped me on East 79th a little before noon. Horace Latchley's townhouse had brownstone dignity without shouting. 2 cars at the curb and a uniformed cop on the stoop rail, bored but alert. I flashed my smile and walked up. I'm Archie Goodwin, here to see Mrs. Lyle, I said. He started to frown, then waved me in. "Housekeeper's inside. Don't touch anything." I don't touch without permission. I stepped past him and rang anyway. A thin woman in black opened, eyes red but posture firm. "Mrs. Lyle?" "Yes. I work for Nero Wolfe. Mr. Harker asked us to look into the accident." Her mouth tightened. "Accident, that's what they call it." "That's why I'm here. May I?" She stood aside. The house smelled of polish and something metallic. In the library, 2 cops were cataloging, and a fire axe had nicked the safe room door frame. The safe room door was a slab of brushed steel with a narrow control panel and a mechanical latch housing the size of a loaf of bread. I nodded to the cops and crouched by the panel. There were scuffs around the latch plate, fresh and shallow. The internal release handle, a short bar inset in the door, hung by one screw, the metal sheared clean at the joint. Too clean for a panic yank. I didn't touch it, just looked close enough to smell machine oil. Mrs. Lyle hovered. "He went in there after Mr. Harker left. He did that when he was angry. Said it helped him think." "Did anyone else come by after Mr. Harker?" "Miss Celia, around 6. She stayed 10 minutes. They argued in the hall. She left." "Did she go into the safe room?" "No, she slammed the front door so hard the latch rattled." I filed that away. "Anyone else?" "Mr. Martin came at 7. He has his own key. He was in the library a while. I heard him try the safe door, tapping on it. Then he left." "Did he say why he came?" "Something about a prototype. He was upset." "Anybody from the company? Miss Voss? Mr. Rook?" "Not here." "What about phone calls?" She hesitated. "There was one at 9. Mr. Latchley's private line rang in the library. I answered. A man asked for him. I said he was not to be disturbed. The man hung up." "Did you recognize the voice?" "No." The cop from the stoop stuck his head in. "Goodwin, Inspector Kramer's upstairs." I went up to the front parlor where Kramer was planted like a wardrobe in a chair that wasn't built for it. "Archie," he said. "Wolfe send you?" "Yeah." "He thinks it's theatrical." Kramer snorted. "My boys say mechanical failure. Door jammed, release broke, old man stuck. Sad but neat." "Neat isn't a word I'd use for a broken release bar." He eyed me. "You're looking at it then?" "Without touching. Mrs. Lyle says Celia argued here at 6. Martin came at 7. Unknown call at 9. His eyebrows climbed. "She didn't tell my boys that. They didn't ask with my charm." He grunted. "We talked to the daughter, nephew, CFO, consultant. All sing regrets and poor Uncle Horace. No marks on the door except the fire boy's work. System checks out except the release bar. Lab says metal fatigue. Fatigue doesn't snap clean at one point on a bar inspected last month." Kramer shifted. "I'll have the lab confirm, but don't get fancy. People die in safe rooms." "Sure, and people get murdered in them too." He stood, looming. "Tell Wolfe if he's taken this, he better have something solid." "I'll pass the love." I went back down, thanked Mrs. Lyle, and stepped out. The stoop latch clicked when I pulled the door to, a little louder than I liked. I looked at the polished brass. Somebody who knew doors had been here. Maybe still was. I hailed a cab for Midtown with the safe room's clean break in my head like a warning bell. If Wolfe was right, the killer had turned a safeguard into a tomb, and the next stop was Latchley Instruments to see who handled the dead man's toys last night. Latchley Instruments occupied 4 floors of a glass and limestone building on Lexington, the kind that says, "Trust us," without neon. In the lobby, a kid with a headset sized me up like I might be a loose bolt. "I'm here for Mr. Martin Latchley, Archie Goodwin from Mr. Harker's office." He called upstairs, then handed me a badge. "Engineering, 21st floor. They're expecting you." Engineering was quiet. A receptionist pointed me down a corridor that smelled of coffee and solder. Martin Latchley met me at a glass conference room. 40s, Thin jaw, grey eyes, sleepless. Goodwin? Harker's sending help now. Not Harker. I'm doing some legwork for Nero Wolfe. That earned a twitch. Why would he? He cut it off. All right, sit. I don't know what I'm allowed to say. Try. I'm not the police. Comforting. He rubbed his forehead. Uncle Horace didn't trust the police. He barely trusted me. Yet you're head engineer. Because I was useful, and because he needed a Latchley in the lab. A cramped smile. He believed blood carried better tolerances. Mrs. Lyle says you went to the townhouse last night. I did. I was worried. He hadn't answered calls. Celia said he'd shut himself in his safe room after throwing Harker out. Sometimes he did that for an hour, not overnight. So I went. Did you try the door? Yes. Sealed. External indicators normal. I knocked and called. No answer. I assumed he was sulking and left. I regretted. Why were you really there? He bristled, then let it go. A prototype release lever, the Halo project. Uncle Horace insisted on keeping it at his house. I wanted it in the lab today for calibration, but I didn't go inside. I couldn't. Could you disable the override from outside? No. Once sealed, the latch is internal. The external panel only reads status unless you have the master key and coded sequence. Uncle Horace kept both on him. Who knows that sequence? Me and Irene Voss. CFO wanted it for liability, and Grant Rook, in theory. Uncle Horace let him audit the system. Rook's the consultant. Strategic efficiency. Martin's lip curled. He's been pushing cuts and licensing. Uncle Horace hated him, but he listened. Did you see Rook last night? No. I was here until 8. He left around 6. Celia argued with your uncle at 6. Of course. He pushed back his chair. She wants to sell. She's been at him for months. Now she'll say she was making peace. She's good at narratives. Would she kill him? He didn't answer fast. She loved him. She also hated the way he treated her. I don't know what that adds up to. Neither do I. I stood. I'd like to look at the Halo lever. His head snapped. Why? Because the internal release bar broke clean. If Halo uses a different alloy or design, it might tell us who handled what. He hesitated, then led me into the lab. Benches, microscopes, trays of parts. From a locked cabinet, he pulled a small assembly, a curved handle with a jointed neck, light but tough. I didn't touch it, just leaned close. The joint was the same style as the dead bar's break. You said this was at the townhouse, so yesterday it was there, and now it's here. When did you retrieve it? This morning, after the police cleared the room. Cleared at 10. You're here by noon. That's quick for a grieving nephew. Color rose in his face. I'm running a company. We have a launch next week. And your uncle's corpse is a delay. I kept it mild. Who said you could remove equipment from a death scene? The inspector said once photographed, company property could go. He met my eyes. Are you accusing me, Mr. Goodwin? Not yet. I collect facts. Wolfe handles accusations. I nodded at the cabinet. Any chance the liver got swapped while you were there last night? No, I told you I didn't enter. Right. I put on my hat. Thanks. If Wolfe wants you, he'll call. He watched me go with a look like he was measuring a door he couldn't quite close. Still for the moment. I left Martin pacing in his glass box and headed down the corridor, letting the pieces settle. The clean break on the release bar, the Halo lever with its twin-jointed neck, Martin's quick retrieval, Celia's temper, the mystery caller at 9. None of it sat comfortably, and comfort isn't my line of work anyway. The receptionist gestured toward the elevators, but before I reached them, a woman with clipped steps and a ledger under her arm intercepted me. She had the frosty efficiency of someone who kept numbers and people equally in line. "You're Mr. Goodwin," she said. not a question. I'm Irene Voss. She didn't offer a hand, so I didn't insult her by extending one. CFO and keeper of the sacred codes, I said. We don't keep anything sacred here. We keep it accurate. She angled her chin. I understand you're asking questions about last night. Not questions, clarifications. You won't get them from Martin. He's rattled. He shouldn't be talking to anyone. But talking to me is safer than talking to a cop. Her eyes flicked. If you have business here, say it. Otherwise, I'll show you out. I'd like to know why the internal override sequence had 3 custodians. Latch wasn't the trusting type. Redundancy, she said. He believed everyone could fail at least once, including himself. And yet he kept the master key on him. That was his quirk, not mine. Where were you last night between 6 and 10? In my office until 7, then dinner with our auditors at Selden's. 4 witnesses. We discussed quarterly losses and promotional liabilities. Losses you've been hiding? Her eyes sharpened like a knife's second edge. If Celia or Martin said that, they lied. The only thing hidden around here was the fact that Horace was gambling the firm's future on a vanity project. The Halo launch is over budget and undertested, but he wouldn't hear it. What about Grant Rook? Grant hears everything that makes him seem useful. He's a consultant. His job is to recommend we fire half our staff in the name of efficiency. You want him? 20th floor. He'll be thrilled to meet you. She stepped aside like she'd been holding back a tide and now released it. I thanked her and went to find Rook. Grant Rook had a corner office, which told me he'd either charmed or bullied his way into senior territory. He was mid-50s, sun-tanned, with the build of a man who spent weekends in boats and weekdays in boardrooms. A framed certificate on the wall announced his credentials as if I'd come doubting them. He nodded me in. You're from Wolfe's outfit. This must be serious. It depends how you define the word. I define it as something that impacts deliverables and timelines. He sat and steepled his fingers. Horace's death does both. You spoke with him yesterday. Briefly. He was furious about the Halo projections. He accused me of manipulating the numbers. I told him numbers don't bend unless someone bends them. Who would that be? Irene Voss has been softening blow after blow. But Martin's the real problem. He's brilliant, but stubborn. Horace trusted him more than anyone, which tells you something about both of them. You leave at 6 last night? 6:10. I take the same car service every evening. They'll verify. What did you think of Horace's safe room? His smile thinned. A monument to paranoia. He designed systems that could outthink burglars, but forgot to allow for human error. Or human interference. He leaned forward. Are you suggesting sabotage? Because if that's true, you're talking about someone with access, competence, and motive. That narrows the field. 2. He tapped his desk. To the people who needed him gone. Celia wants the sale. Irene wants the books cleaned. Martin wants freedom. And Harker, well, Harker has his own ambitions. You think Harker would kill his employer? I think Harker wants importance. Men like him sometimes leap for it. I let him chew on his own confidence and left. In the elevator, I checked my watch. Wolfe would be expecting me before lunch. Turned into a tragedy. Outside, the wind whipped around the corner like it had something to prove. I walked 2 blocks before a sensation crawled up my neck, the kind you get when someone is behind you but pretending they're not. I slowed at a window display and caught a reflection. A man in a dark coat, ordinary, but ordinary in the way professionals try to look when they don't want to be remembered. He paused when I paused. When I moved again, he did too. That wasn't random, and it wasn't courtesy. I cut across the street, slipped into a drugstore, and pretended to study shaving brushes. He lingered outside. Wolfe wouldn't appreciate me bringing a tale to the brownstone, so I exited through the rear door into the alley, circled the block, and came out half a block behind him. He was still searching for me, scanning faces with quick, narrow glances. I made sure he saw me seeing him. He froze. Then he walked fast, disappearing into traffic. If he was connected to Latchley's death, he had nerves of glass. And if he wasn't, someone had started paying attention to my movements earlier than they should have. Either way, Wolfe was going to relish hearing about it. By the time I reached the brownstone, the wind had turned sharp enough to qualify as a reprimand, but Fritz opened the door before I could complain to it. Inside, the air was warm and smelled of tarragon. Wolfe was in the office, naturally, seated and composed, the picture of someone who had not moved a single muscle since I'd left. He opened one eye when I entered, which for Wolfe counts as a burst of enthusiasm. "You're late," he said. "Traffic, murder, sabotage, and a tail. Take your pick." Both eyes opened now. A tail. Male, ordinary. But the kind of ordinary that means someone paid him to be forgettable. Picked me up outside Latchley Instruments. Followed me 2 blocks. I shook him, but he wasn't improvising. He was waiting for instructions he already had. Wolfe grunted. If you've never heard Wolfe grunt, imagine a man swallowing an argument because the logic isn't ripe yet. Your report. I gave him the whole tour. The safe room's 2 clean break, Celia's argument, Martin's late visit, the 9 o'clock call, Kramer's mechanical failure pep talk, Irene Voss's cold arithmetic, Martin's prototype lever, and Rook's efficiency gospel. Wolfe absorbed it without one interruption, which is how I knew he was storing each piece in a mental grid where everything has to align or the universe offends him. "So," I finished, "that's the roster, plus 1 tail. If you want Saul on it, now's the time." "I already summoned him," Wolfe said. "He arrived at 2. "Where is he?" "In the front room, listening." I hadn't noticed him, which proves Saul Panzer remains the champion of invisibility. He drifted in now, nodding to me. Wolfe said, "Mr. Goodwin has been followed. I want the man identified. He may be linked to the death, or he may be a hired simpleton. Either way, find him." Saul nodded. Description? I supplied it, sparse as it was. Saul said, "I'll start near Latchley Instruments," and left without further ceremony. I envied him. He got the outdoor work and none of the lecturing. Wolfe steepled his fingers. This death was engineered. I agree, but not crudely. The override bar was replaced or tampered with before the door closed. That requires access and foresight, which narrows it to the people with either Martin, Irene, Celia, Rook, Harker, or someone using one of them. Harker? Wolfe's tone suggested he doubted my throat was functioning properly. He's shaky, dramatic, and close enough to the old man to know habits. Also, Rook hinted he wanted importance badly enough to jump at it. Wolfe dismissed that with an eyelid. Harker lacks nerve. He might lack it until he finds it. Wolfe shut the argument down not by speaking, but by shifting his attention to the newspapers on his desk. That meant the matter was closed for now. The key question is motivation. Who benefits from a malfunction? The company is facing losses. The launch is failing. A death can serve as catalyst or shield. A shield for the CFO, or for the engineer, or for those wishing to sell the firm before the losses appear on record. He leaned back, eyes half-lidded. But sabotage inside a safe room implies knowledge not only of the mechanics, but of the victim's habits. That implies intimacy with the man's routines. Martin had access. Celia had motive. Irene had fear. Rook had ambition. And all deny involvement. Wolfe took a breath as shallow as a whisper. "We require a lever." I grinned. Pun intended. "Archie," he said sternly, "fetch the latch." I thought he meant ours. "The one on the front door? It's moody again. That is why I wish to inspect it." "Bring it." I retrieved my toolkit from the basement. Removing the latch required only 10 minutes, partly because Fritz watched me like I was violating a national monument. I brought the whole assembly to Wolfe, who inspected it with a stare that could have melted brass. He didn't touch it. He said, "Open it." I disassembled the plate. Inside was the usual spring and catch, nothing fancy. But at the bottom edge was a faint scratch, fresh, narrow, angled. I hadn't made it. Wolfe leaned forward. That was not there this morning. Meaning someone jiggered our latch while Harker was here. Meaning, Wolfe said, someone wanted to test something, or plant something, or confirm something. Confirm what? That the latch would resist on the first try, that it would mimic the townhouse latch. A chill crawled up my spine. You think the same hand touched both? It is plausible. Someone inside this house tested a mechanism identical to the one that killed Horace Latchley, which means the killer was here, under our roof, within these hours, and had access to the front door. I felt the air shift, as if the walls themselves were listening. Yes, Wolfe's voice dropped. This house is inviolate. To breach it is unforgivable, and to use it as rehearsal space for murder is intolerable. The phone rang. Wolfe let it go once before nodding at me. "Answer," he said. I picked it up. Saul Panzer's voice came through, low and steady. "I have your tale," he said, "and you're going to want to hear where he works." Saul didn't waste air. "Your tale works security for Latchley Instruments," he said. "Contract hire. Name's Dylan Marr. No record, but he's been on short assignments for companies looking to keep things quiet. I followed him to a diner on 48th. He met someone there." "Who?" I asked, though I already felt the knot forming. "Grant Rook." That didn't surprise me, but it did irritate me that Rook had moved this quickly. Saul added, "Rook paid him cash. Looked like instructions. When they finished, Marr left by the back door. Rook stayed put. He's still there if you want him." I glanced at Wolfe. He had his eyes closed, but that didn't fool me. When Wolfe closes his eyes in the middle of a revelation, it means he's assembling the machinery of a conclusion. I told Saul, "Stay on Rook, don't approach, just trail him until he stops moving." "Done," Saul said, and hung up. I relayed the update to Wolfe. When I got to Rook's name, Wolfe's eyelids twitched. "Predictable," he murmured. "Predictable? He hired a tail to keep track of me. Most people wait until the second date. He is attempting to determine what Mr. Goodwin knows. That is a sign of anxiety and incompetence. Dangerous only when mishandled. So Rook mishandles things? He mishandles people, which is worse." I sat. "You think he sabotaged the safe room?" "I think he lacks loyalty, taste, and shame. Sabotage is well within that trinity, but I do not yet think he is our culprit." "What holds you back?" "He is too visible, too performative. He likes being noticed. A man who breaks an override lever so precisely does not crave an audience. Unless he wants us to think it was someone else. Unless," Wolfe conceded. Before I could push further, the doorbell rang, sharp and impatient. Fritz answered, and his muffled voice drifted to us. A moment later, he opened the office door with a look suggesting he had wrestled with propriety and lost. "Miss Latchley," he said. Celia Latchley entered like a cold wind in a silk coat. She was in her 30s, dark hair pinned in a twist, eyes that had been red recently but were now hardened by something not quite grief. She carried a leather folder and a purpose. "Mr. Wolfe," she said without sitting, "I understand you're meddling in my father's death." Wolfe didn't rise, naturally. "Meddling," he repeated mildly, "is not among my occupations." "Then cease. The company is already unstable. Reporters are circling. My father's death was tragic, but it was not a conspiracy." I gestured to the guest chair. "You've had a hectic day. Try gravity." She sat reluctantly. "My cousin said you were asking questions at our offices." "Martin shouldn't have spoken to you." "Martin spoke plenty," I said, "though not as much as Mr. Rook." Her jaw tightened. Rook is an advisor. He has the board's ear. Does he have yours? I asked. She bristled. He has recommendations. Some are helpful, many are not, but none are criminal. No one said they were. She looked at Wolfe. My father could be impossible, but he wasn't murdered. I know that room. The override bar was old. It's been inspected, yes, but metal fails. People fail. And grief is not made easier when strangers fabricate conspiracies. Wolfe studied her with a sort of patience that makes strong people uneasy. Miss Latchley, your father's safe room was designed precisely so metal would not fail. The break was clean, intentional. Someone wanted him trapped. She swallowed hard. Then blame the engineers, not me. I wasn't there. You were, I said gently. 6 o'clock. You argued. The housekeeper heard you. She stiffened. Yes. I confronted him. He was sabotaging the sale. We could have saved the company. He refused. He shut himself in the safe room to avoid me. So I left. After slamming the door hard enough to rattle the latch, I said. Her gaze flicked to me, sharp. You think I broke a steel override bar by shouting at a 72-year-old man? No, but you might know who would. She rose halfway, then sat again when Wolfe lifted a finger. Miss Latchley, he said. Someone attempted to test our own door latch today. Someone who had been inside the house recently. Her breath caught. What? You came alone? Wolfe asked. Yes. You touched nothing on your way in? No. Then the breach occurred earlier. Wolfe nodded to himself. Miss Latchley, do any of your colleagues possess an interest in door mechanics, even a casual one? She hesitated. Grant Rook enjoys playing expert in anything, but he isn't technical. Martin? I asked. He worshipped my father's engineering, but he'd never defile it. Irene Voss, Wolfe added. She'd sooner burn the building down than touch a tool. That leaves, Wolfe said, someone who understands mechanisms and prefers subtlety. Celia's voice dropped. Harker? Wolfe opened his eyes fully. Did you tell Mr. Harker you were coming here today? No. Has he called you? No. Then he will, Wolfe said. And soon. Because Mr. Harker knows more than he has admitted. A flush crept up her neck. If you're accusing him... We are not. Accusing, Wolfe said. We are preparing. When he calls, arrange to meet him here. At 7. Why 7? Because Mr. Harker is frightened. Fear is punctual. She gathered her folder, stood, and paused at the door. If you're wrong, she said, you're dragging my family into something it didn't deserve. Miss Latchley, Wolfe replied. No one deserves murder. Least of all the murdered. She left without another word. Wolfe leaned back. Archie. Yeah? Call Kramer. Tell him to prepare for a gathering at 8. That soon? Yes. Wolfe shut his eyes again. The circle is tightening. Wolfe didn't elaborate on the tightening circle, which was fine because the phone began tightening it for him. At 6:30, it rang. I picked up, expecting Kramer confirming he'd arrive with the usual attitude, but instead, Harker's breath came through the receiver before his voice did. Goodwin? Is Mr. Wolfe in? He is. I need to speak with him. Now. I covered the mouthpiece. Harker, I said. Wolfe opened one hand without opening his eyes. I took that as permission. You're in luck, I told Harker. Miss Latchley is coming here at 7. You should both attend. There was a beat of silence. Celia? Why? She has information. Wolfe wants everyone who matters in the same place. Harker's breath hitched. I don't know if I should... You should, I said. 7 sharp. He hung up without goodbye. Wolfe opened his eyes. As predicted, he said. He is frightened, but fear alone does not kill. It only invites miscalculation. You think he's hiding something? I asked. I think all of them are hiding something, Wolfe said. But Harker's evasions are delicate. He is not thick enough to engineer a subtle sabotage, nor bold enough to risk being caught attempting it. He is, however, nervous enough to serve someone else's purpose. Meaning he's a patsy. A patsy in waiting, Wolfe corrected. We shall see what role he has been assigned. 7 o'clock arrived, with Fritz hovering like a mother hen, disapproving of the company her children kept. Celia arrived first, composed but tight around the eyes. She sat in the office chair she'd used earlier, refusing Fritz's offer of wine. 2 minutes later, Harker arrived, looking as though Manhattan had chased him on foot. He went pale when he saw Celia, and she didn't offer him a greeting. The distance between them wasn't emotional, it was strategic. Wolfe nodded at both. Miss Latchley, Mr. Harker. We will proceed shortly. Mr. Goodwin, the others. Irene's on her way. Martin sent word he'd arrived before 8, and Saul says Rook is heading downtown in a cab that he's following. Very good. Harker clasped his hands. Mr. Wolfe, I need to say something before they all get here. Wolfe didn't stop him. Harker swallowed hard. I didn't tell you everything earlier. There was another reason I went to the townhouse. Latchley had something of mine, something I needed to retrieve. He refused to return it. That's why we argued. Celia turned her head sharply. What was it? Harker looked at the floor. A contract, a draft agreement that would have made me partner in a new subsidiary once the firm restructured. He said I hadn't earned it. He was right, maybe, but I wanted it back before he destroyed it. And you thought he'd keep it in the safe room? I asked. He kept everything important in that room. Papers, prototypes, leverage. Harker rubbed his forehead. But when he went inside, I realized if I tried to force the issue, I'd be finished. So I left. Celia's voice cooled. And you didn't mention this because it makes you look guilty. Yes, Harker admitted. But I didn't kill him, I swear. Wolfe said, your omission is noted. It may be relevant. Or not. Harker began to reply, but the doorbell interrupted him. Fritz announced Irene Voss, who entered with the air of someone whose patience had expired last fiscal year. She took a seat and crossed her legs in a way that turned the act into punctuation. Let's get this over with, she said. Before Wolfe could reply, the bell rang again. Martin Latchley stepped in, face drawn, hair windblown, eyes unfocused as though he'd been chasing ghosts. He sat heavily without greeting anyone. Celia's eyes softened briefly. Martin didn't notice. We were only missing one, and the clock ticked toward 8. Wolfe waited, as only Wolfe can wait, utterly still, like time existed merely to amuse him. At 8:06, the bell rang a third time. Fritz opened it with less ceremony than usual, and Grant Rook entered, looking neither rattled nor apologetic. He scanned the room, nodded to no one, and took the remaining chair. Saul slipped in behind him, silent as an afterthought, and leaned against the wall. Wolfe lifted his chin a quarter inch. Gentlemen and ladies, Wolfe began, thank you for coming. I've asked you here because Horace Latchley's death was not an accident. Someone engineered the failure of his safe room using knowledge of its design and familiarity with his habits. That someone is in this room. A ripple went through them. Offense from Irene, shock from Martin, contained fury from Celia, calculation from Rook, and fear, pure and loud, from Harker. Wolfe continued. Before I detail the method and identity of the culprit, I require one final piece. Mr. Goodwin. I straightened. Yes, sir. You will bring me the lever, the one retrieved from the townhouse. Martin tensed. You can't think... Mr. Goodwin, Wolfe repeated. I left the room, went to the drawer where I'd placed the evidence bag, and returned with the halo lever. I set it on Wolfe's desk. He didn't touch it. He only looked at Martin. Mr. Latchley, Wolfe said quietly. Would you be so kind as to explain why the brake on this prototype matches the one on your uncle's override bar, down to the millimeter? Martin's eyes widened, darting to the lever, then to Celia, then to Rook. His throat moved, but no sound came out. Panic, guilt, or shock. Any could wear that expression. Before he could speak, something happened that froze the room. Harker stood up. Not abruptly, not dramatically. He simply rose, shoulders slack, eyes empty. "I can explain," he said. And Wolfe's gaze, sharper than steel, settled on him like a verdict waiting to be spoken. Harker's voice shook, but it wasn't the tremor of a man about to confess guilt. It was the tremor of a man who had been cornered by something he didn't fully understand. He kept his eyes on the floor as he spoke, like each word was dragged out of him by force. "I didn't break anything," he said, "but I knew about the lever. I knew it was different from the standard override. Horace showed it to me 2 weeks ago. He said it was an early halo joint, stronger, more precise. He was proud of it, too proud. He told me no one else should see it until the launch." Martin flinched. "He told you that? He didn't tell me he'd brought it home." "He trusted me," Harker said miserably. "Or thought he did. But I didn't know he'd installed it. I swear I didn't." Wolfe let him talk, his gaze level, his fingers interlaced in the way that meant he wasn't absorbing new information. He was checking it against what he already knew. Celia's voice sliced the air. "You're lying. My father didn't trust you with anything. He barely tolerated you." Harker looked pained. "He did trust me, not emotionally, no, but legally, strategically. I drafted most of his private agreements these past 5 years. He confided more business in me than in either of you." Martin shot up in his chair. "That's because you fed his paranoia." Harker's reply cracked. "Because he needed someone who understood what he was fighting against." Wolfe finally cut in. "Enough. Mr. Harker, you said you can explain. Yet so far, you have explained nothing of consequence. Try again." Harker's hands clenched. "Fine. The brake. You're saying the lever matches the fracture on the override bar. If it does, if the same engineering went into both, there are only 2 people who could have replaced that bar in the safe room, Martin or Irene." Irene stiffened. "How dare you?" "Because I couldn't do it," Harker said. "I don't know metal tolerances. I don't know joint stress patterns, but they do." Rook leaned back, amused. "And you expect us to believe you didn't use someone else's hands to do it?" Harker turned to him. "What would I gain? Horace was going to fire me, but he wasn't going to ruin me. He bluffed. Everyone knows he bluffed. That contract you wanted so badly," Rook said softly. "Maybe he wasn't bluffing this time." Harker's jaw tightened. "I wasn't desperate enough to kill him." Wolfe interjected once more, his voice a low anchor. "Mr. Harker, sit." Harker sat, drained, almost collapsing into the chair. Wolfe shifted his attention to Martin. "Mr. Latchley," he said, "I asked you to explain the match. I did not ask Mr. Harker. What is your answer?" Martin swallowed visibly. "I didn't replace anything. I would never sabotage my uncle's work." "Never?" Wolfe's voice sharpened. "But you retrieved the prototype lever from the townhouse this morning." "Yes. The police said I could. You made haste. It was needed in the lab," Martin insisted. The Halo launch is a distraction," Wolfe cut in. "You retrieved it because you needed to confirm something, or conceal something." Martin went pale. "No. I retrieved it because I panicked. When I saw the override bar snapped, I thought someone might try to blame me. I knew the brake was clean, and that would look like engineering, like sabotage. I brought the prototype back because I wondered if the mechanisms were similar enough that the police would misunderstand." Celia leaned forward, eyes fierce. "So you removed evidence?" "It wasn't evidence," Martin said through his teeth. "Not yet." Rook chuckled. Ingenious. Remove the weapon before anyone knows it's a weapon. Wolfe ignored him. Mr. Latchley, did you tamper with the override bar? No. Did you replace it? No. Did you inspect it recently? Yes, Martin said. 3 weeks ago, it was perfectly intact. Then, Wolfe said, someone altered it after your inspection, before yesterday evening. Irene finally spoke, ice cold. If you're implying I used company property to kill our founder, you're deranged. I wasn't at the townhouse. I don't even know how to use a torque wrench. You know numbers, Wolfe replied, and numbers tell stories. Perhaps you saw disaster coming and decided to accelerate it. Irene's voice stayed steady. Horace was a fool, not a threat. Rook shifted in his seat, stretching his legs like he owned the place. This is going nowhere. If someone wanted Horace dead, it was someone with access to the house. Someone who could move freely without raising suspicion. Someone he trusted enough to let into his library. Celia looked sharply at him. You mean me? You're the only one with a key besides Martin, Rook said, and the only one who knew how fragile the company was. Celia's face turned white with anger. I visited him at 6. He was alive. I would never... Wolfe raised a hand, silencing them all. The culprit, he said evenly, is not the one who argued loudest, nor the one with the most to gain immediately. It is the one who required a very specific sequence of events, timing, access, materials, familiarity. His eyes moved slowly across the room. Mr. Goodwin. Yes? Fetch the telephone. I did. Call Inspector Kramer, Wolfe said. Celia gasped. Irene stiffened. Martin's hands shook. Harker closed his eyes. Rook's smirk faltered for the first time. Wolfe finished. Tell him the murderer is ready to be collected. Every eye in the room locked on Wolfe, waiting, dreading, hungry. But he hadn't named the killer. Not yet. I phoned Kramer, told him Wolfe was ready, and got his promise to be here in 10 minutes with handcuffs and complaints. When I hung up, nobody moved. Wolfe let the silence sit until it belonged to him. Now, he said, we proceed. He spoke as if reciting a checklist. Horace Latchley had not died because steel whimpered. The override bar in his safe room was deliberately weakened at the joint so it would look sound and then snap cleanly when he pulled hard. The break matched the weak point of the halo lever Martin had brought because someone copied that flaw, not because the lever itself had been installed. Martin shook his head. He said he would never tamper with his uncle's private room. Wolfe agreed. Martin was too proud of his engineering to hide a change. Whoever did it wanted no signature, only a failure timed to when Horace was alone. That required knowledge of both the mechanism and Horace's habit of locking himself in after a quarrel. He described that habit most freely, Wolfe said, to his lawyer and his consultant. Mr. Rook hired a man to follow Mr. Goodwin only after learning of my involvement. That shows fear, not authorship. His tools are reports, not files. Rook scowled but stayed put. Wolfe turned to Harker. Mr. Harker, he said, knew 3 things together. First, that an early halo joint had been fitted to the door and that Horace was proud of it. You told us he demonstrated it. Second, that when enraged, he shut himself in that room and later pulled hard on the inside release. Third, that a draft contract promising you advancement lay among the papers he kept there, and that he threatened to destroy it. Celia stared at Harker. He muttered that it had only been a draft. Wolfe didn't let him continue. If Horace lived and burned it, Harker was finished. If Horace died with it intact, Harker's claim might survive. So, sometime after the joint was installed, and before Martin's last inspection, Harker visited the townhouse on business, stepped into the safe room, and with a small tool, scored the bar at the joint on the inner side. To the eye, it remained whole. Under strain, it was primed to break. You didn't have to be there when it went, I said. Yesterday, you just had to make him mad enough to shut himself in. You did, Wolfe told him. Harker argued at 4, left at 5, and at 9 o'clock telephoned the house. When the housekeeper answered from the library and refused to disturb her employer, he knew Horace had not come out. Had Horace left the room, he would have answered or been seen. Harker watched the rug. He still didn't deny it. "Today," Wolfe went on, "you came here to see how much I knew. When you closed my front door, the latch hesitated. It is one of your client's products." The feel recalled the tampered bar. "You wondered whether Horace might have noticed the same resistance before he died. While you lingered in the vestibule, you opened the latch plate with whatever tool you carry. Testing. You left a fresh scratch inside the housing. I examined it this morning. It was not there. Mr. Goodwin later removed the latch and saw the mark. No one else with reason to meddle entered this house between those times." Harker lifted his head and said we were making a case out of a scratch. Wolfe said the scratch was only the last piece. Saul had traced the tale to Rook, not to our door. Fritz had seen Harker loiter with his hand near the latch, not his coat. Only Harker combined resentment, knowledge of the halo joint, access to the safe room, and the willingness to let a mechanism do his killing while he stood elsewhere. Celia drew back. Martin looked sick. Irene exhaled once. Rook's smirk was gone. Harker sagged. "He waved that contract at me and laughed," he said. "He said he'd tear it up in front of me. I wanted him shut in with his own invention until he needed someone else to get him out. I thought they'd cut the door. I didn't mean—" "You meant to trap him," Wolfe said. "The fact that you lacked the courage to watch does not cancel that." Kramer's step sounded in the hall. He filled the doorway, coat open, cigar unlit. "All right, Wolfe," he said. "Is this real or another exercise?" "Calvin Harker sabotaged the override bar in Horace Latchley's safe room," Wolfe answered. "You will find deliberate scoring at the break and a fresh tool mark inside my own latch, where he repeated his trial. His remarks here will assist you." Kramer took one long look at Harker, then stepped in with the cuffs. "Come along, counselor," he said. "We'll go talk where the door's locked the other way." Harker didn't fight. The front door opened and closed behind them. The latch caught on the first clean click. For the first time since the case began, a latch in this business behaved exactly as designed. Kramer's departure left a quiet that felt earned. The others remained seated, each turning over the weight of what had just unfolded. Celia breathed in sharply, as if realizing for the first time that anger and grief could coexist without canceling each other. Martin slumped back, the stiffness draining from him, replaced by something that looked like exhaustion layered over relief. Irene watched the door with an accountant's steadiness, perhaps tallying the damage and deciding what columns needed rewriting. Rook alone seemed annoyed, like a man denied the entertainment he hoped for. Wolfe didn't dismiss them. He simply allowed silence to cool the room. It took less than a minute for Celia to rise. She thanked Wolfe in a voice stretched thin but steady. She looked at me, nodded once as if acknowledging the unpleasant necessity of my legwork, and gathered herself to leave. Martin followed her out, shoulders bunched but lighter than when he came. Irene paused briefly, offering a tight nod that might have counted as respect. Even Rook managed a curt acknowledgement before slipping out with irritation simmering under his suit. When the door shut, Wolfe exhaled and leaned back as if lowering a drawbridge. He closed his eyes and let the room return to its natural order. I restored the latch plate, testing the door twice, satisfied that everything clicked the way it ought to. Fritz brought coffee, setting the tray down as though grateful the house had not absorbed permanent harm from recent intrusions. "You knew early," I said. Wolfe didn't open his eyes. "Earlier than they did, but not early enough to spare us the tedium of their theatrics." "You don't think Harker meant to kill him?" "I think intention is frequently irrelevant," Wolfe replied. "He acted from resentment mixed with desperation, a potent but idiotic mixture. Horace Latchley built mechanisms to prevent human failure, yet succumbed to one engineered by a man he underestimated. Poetic, if one is inclined to poetry. I took my coffee and sat. You got him because he tested our latch. That confirmed him, Wolfe said. The rest was simple alignment. Motive woven with opportunity, opportunity threaded with nerve. A man does not need to understand metallurgy to score a line into steel. He only needs to believe no one will notice, especially the victim. I thought about that, watching steam rise from my cup. You think he realized Horace might actually suffocate? Doubtful, Wolfe said. People rarely imagine the consequences of their designs. They only imagine the satisfaction of seeing someone humbled. And you? Wolfe finally opened his eyes and looked at me with a calm that made the whole evening feel smaller. I imagined dinner. That was Wolfe's way of closing a case. Not a moral lecture, not a lament for human frailty, just a quiet preference for order restored and appetite acknowledged. Fritz's voice drifted from the kitchen, promising something with butter, and I knew the brownstone was easing back into its natural rhythm. The house felt whole again. Latch repaired, intruder removed, equilibrium regained. As I stood to go wash up, Wolfe added, almost as an afterthought, Archie, ensure the door is locked properly tonight. Once violated, even steel deserves reassurance. I gave him a grin. You've got it. The latch clicked behind me as I left the office, crisp, certain, and loyal to its purpose. And with that sound, the case settled into memory, exactly where Wolfe preferred all. Solved problems to remain.